Hello, I'm Jessica Shelley. I'm the co-founder and head educator at DailiesPods. Today we have Miss Emily here with us. She's one of our fabulous DailiesPods educators here to talk about a topic in education that she is very passionate about. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Miss Emily. So glad to have you with us. What topic are we going to be talking about today in the field of education?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Something I really like to talk about is Montessori. I've taught in a lot of different classroom environments, and I've actually taught a lot of different ages, preschool all the way to adults. And something I really like to focus on is how you can implement the Montessori ideas at home. A lot of parents see it as this big, scary thing oh, Montessori, it must be super strict. But there are so many little ways that you can help your child just be so independent. I love it. It's one of the things I'm very passionate about.
Awesome. Super excited to get into this. Can you give us a little bit more of a background as far as who you are and why you enjoy teaching with DailiesPods?
So I actually didn't originally set out to be a teacher. My passion lies in a lot of different areas. A lot of people say I'm crazy about English. I love English grammar. But I just kind of fell into a teaching position at a preschool, and I absolutely loved it. There's something about shaping young minds that really imprinted on me, and especially having experience teaching all the way through to adults, and in the English as a second language field as well. Teaching children really sets them up for their future, and
Mhm.
that's just something I fell in love with. And then on top of that, I grew up in Montessori. So not only did I want to teach children, but I want to teach children the ideas that are presented in a Montessori classroom. Um, and I like to do it while having fun. So I really have shaped my teaching ideals around that. And my love for teaching has grown so much. Outside of being a teacher, I'm a mom. I have a little zoo at home, a dog, a cat, a snake, and a fish tank. So I
Whoa.
always try to incorporate
Awesome.
that into my lessons. It's part of my life. I like to be a person because kids, when they come to classes, I'm so used to teachers from my growing up being so strict and rigid, and I'm a teacher, and to an appropriate extent I like to also be a person and talk about my life to kids. um I live in Texas, which is pretty cool. I think I grew up in the Maryland, Washington D.C. area, so near the
Oh,
state
cool.
capitol. Got to visit the White House for just walking around Washington D.C. So that's an experience that was really cool. And now I live in Texas near the Capitol, and I get to walk around downtown. And I like that. It's hard to talk about yourself because you think about it and you're like, what really is? What really is interesting? But I think I've touched on some of the most interesting parts. I did classical ballet for a very long time. So,
Oh, that's cool
I
too.
have my degree, my major in college was English literature, but my minor was dance. So I have a lot of passions in a lot of different places.
We might have to start incorporating some dance classes into our program. You could be a dance teacher too. There you go. That'd be fun. I'm sure that the kids would love that. Um, and then I guess as far as your time here with DailiesPods, why have you enjoyed, or what have you enjoyed about your experience with teaching virtually in the classroom setting?
So this is actually my second experience teaching virtually. A lot of our lives got really shaken up when COVID kind of took everything by storm. And I helped my previous school transition to Zoom learning. And so that was it was a Montessori preschool. And I did a lot of the legwork to get the curriculum ready to go from in person to Zoom. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to stay at that position. But when I was searching for jobs, I did a lot of research on DailiesPods, and I was like, oh, wow. So they actually have already implemented online learning. And so obviously I went through the whole interview process, and I'm a teacher here now. But
Yeah.
there's just something special about the way Dailies allows their teachers to take their own pedagogy and beliefs and incorporate it into the Zoom learning environment. And
Mhm.
it's very unique to a school. I feel like there are still those standards that were held to very high standards. but I also get to be my own teacher and follow, my heart with teaching kids. So I think that's really cool and really unique. And the virtual environment allows me to reach out to kids all over the United States. And so many, I like to teach different languages. And I like to learn to count to 10 in different languages. So in my pods, I do English, Spanish, and Chinese. And I have a friend in Thailand, so I'm learning how to count to 10 in Thai. But so many of my kids even come on and they're like, yeah, I can count to 10 in Hindi. Do you want me to teach you? And I'm like, sure, be the teacher for a few minutes. Teach me something. And, that I like that environment where I get to experience so many different kids and hear about them and their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely something that's unique about our platform is we do have those really high standards, but then it's also about making connections with kids and being authentic to who you are as an educator, because then you can, it's really about that customization and personalization, right? Every single kid isn't going to attach to every single teacher. I apologize. I think we have a thunderstorm happening this morning. So there's thunder behind me. But it really is about that personalization and, finding the right teacher match and finding the right program match. And even though we can hit the academic standards, whether we have come at it from a Montessori approach or, a traditional classroom approach, there's just so much variety that we can provide to families to really oh my goodness, to really cater to those student needs.
We have some percussion to back us up.
I guess. We should maybe start singing or rapping or something. I feel like, I don't know. Yeah, we'll see how long this goes on. This is a little crazy that it all of a sudden got dark outside. Well, cool. I'm excited to talk about Montessori education with you and kind of this approach to learning, and then also hear a little bit more about how you might integrate some of this into your virtual classroom and at home with your kiddos. So I guess as far as baseline, what is Montessori education, or what is the approach?
So a lot of people, I said this at the beginning, a lot of people feel like Montessori is so strict and rigid that it's scary. And I think the biggest takeaway that I find important for parents and after teaching is that it's a way for students to learn and kids to learn that is independent, and it encourages self-motivation and a love for learning, but it also promotes a hands-on setting in academics. Far too often, I see a lot of kids whose learning style is not traditional or is not, okay, memorize these facts and write it down. And I actually taught in a classroom where the curriculum basis was memorize the letters and then say them back. And that shows that you had an understanding of the alphabet. And I'm like, well, that's not how it works. And the nice thing is a lot of teachers that I've talked to, even if it's not Montessori standards, don't like that approach because it's difficult to engage in learning with rote memorization only. So Montessori allows you to go back to the core and the foundation, and you learn the why behind things. Something I find interesting, very traditional Montessori, is you learn the letter sounds before the letter names. And that's not always, appropriate for kids. That's not always what your student might need. Or, I'm coming in and teaching your kids before they go into first grade. So they probably already know the names of the letters. And they're going back and kind of figuring out how to make those sound connections. But I just think it's interesting with Montessori that the foundation is to build up from the bottom, like building blocks. Instead of memorize this and then go backwards, we're learning the letter sounds and then how to make the words from there.
Yeah, that's a great point too. Back in the day when I was in my teacher preparation program, we talked about the difference between phonemic awareness and phonics, and how, many teachers, especially at kinder and first grade, they go directly in with the phonics. But it really does start with understanding that words are made of sounds, and then what sounds the words are made of, in order to make that connection, which is just the sound and symbol relationship is what phonics is. So understanding that the symbol S makes the S sound, that's phonics. Phonemic awareness is knowing S and being able to figure out where that is in the word. So I love that Montessori has that same sort of, we have a visitor maybe this morning.
Maybe. Hopefully stays asleep.
Oh, so sweet. But yeah, it really is that foundational skill of just the sounds. So that's super interesting too. I didn't know that that was necessarily like a Montessori related practice.
Yeah, we do
Wow,
the
we
same
have an
thing with
eventful morning.
and we do the same thing with math, which I think is really, really awesome. Where, I even start addition and, you start with the counting and the basics of learning quantities. But once kids are ready to start addition, we're doing addition in the thousands, 1,322 plus 3,426. And so kids learn that, and you can't count those numbers on your fingers. So
Right.
you only have 10 fingers. And if you count an ASL, I mean, you can get away with a little bit more, but you don't see that quantity. So I think it's very cool that you learn about the foundations and then you learn the tricks afterwards. You learn that, oh, you have 10 fingers, you can count on your fingers, but you learn that after you learn the basics of the foundation. It's just a very interesting approach to me.
Yeah, no, definitely sounds interesting and maybe not as the traditional school would have presented information. Most of our parents have probably gone to public school, private school, and had like the same sort of experience with like the standard algorithm for math. So all of these kind of newer approaches, but Montessori is also a very old approach, right?
It's over 100 years old, which
Yeah,
I mean, it's lasted so long. It's gone through so many changes and adaptations based on student needs.
yeah, which is great that, we're building in different types of skill sets. And I think if anything, it kind of rings true that every child comes to, if they go to public school, they come to that experience with a different background. They could be coming from a Montessori preschool, they could be coming from a Head Start program or being homeschooled from mom and dad. So it's pretty interesting to think about the diversity too in the public school classroom. But I guess what are some of the benefits of using like the Montessori approach or adopting that at home?
So I think the biggest benefit is it promotes independence and autonomy in kids. And it can even be as simple as letting them pick out their own clothes. Something I love to tell parents is that, you have to provide the whole closet because that can be very overwhelming. But putting two
Mhm.
or three choices on the bed and, not caring if your child comes dressed inside out, backwards, pants on their head, as long as they're appropriate for the day.
Mhm.
And the necessary body parts are covered for the environment that you're going to, just letting your kid learn that independence. And Montessori really encourages that, and encourages the parent and the teacher kind of taking a step back and allowing kids to focus on what they like, what they enjoy. And I'm not saying we take away the academics, because I could say, oh, only let your kid do what they enjoy and they don't like math, but math is a necessary subject to succeed. So
Mhm.
it's that taking a step back. And something that I had to really, really adjust to after training to be, a teacher and then entering into a very serious Montessori classroom was that observation.
Mhm.
And Montessori is more about observation and modeling than it is about stepping in and taking a child's hands and moving them for them. And for me, that can be difficult because I see a child that's like this close. Even my baby, I have a 6-month-old, he'll be so close to doing something. Right now he's practicing his pincher grip and he's crawling, and I'm like, I just want to open his hand up and move it and be like, just like this, just like this. But the Montessorian in me tells me, take a step back, just sit and watch him. He's going to develop, he's going to do this on his own. But if I do it for him, he loses that wonder and that waiting. It's
Mhm.
and I think that's the most important part of entertaining Montessori in your home, in your classroom, is that each child is going to be able to do their own thing, and that their autonomy will drive their learning and their motivation.
That's a great point too. So I think like from the parenting perspective, there's like the parents that go in to like rescue. And that's kind of what I think about. I'm guilty of that. Oh my goodness.
I mean, I am
But
too. I can, I say as much as
no.
I can, and I'll still go in and be like, "You hit your head. Do you want a hug?" Like, you don't have to pick yourself up. I'll pick you up for you.
Right. And so I love that kind of connection too to like that parenting aspect. So kind of like not rescuing them when it comes to education, because it is kind of more of that exploratory approach. And more, I guess, more self-paced too, really.
Mhm.
and personalized in that way, that we're not pushing them towards the next thing. We're letting them kind of discover it on their own or interact with it on their own, but then supporting as needed, of course. But yeah, I love that. Have you been able to integrate any sort of like Montessori practices into your DailiesPods classes?
So I've been working to kind of promote a lot of self-learning in my DailiesPods classes, and that we do. So virtual learning, you don't get to actually hold a lot of things in your hands, and that can be tough for students because Montessori is a lot about having a physical thing to hold and touch and look at. But I encourage students to read on their own or to give me descriptions without prompting. So a lot of times when we're speaking, hello, teachers will model first, which is a great approach. It's just a little bit different from Montessori. So if I ask a question like, what was your favorite part of the book? Instead of starting and saying my favorite part was when the dog found his bone, I will ask the students to answer first. Because if I'm answering saying that's my favorite part, then I'm influencing their favorite parts, because if they can't remember or they're having trouble thinking of one, they'll just latch onto mine. And I still catch myself sometimes getting so excited that I want to start out. But I try to do that even with math. I'll stop and I'll pause. And a lot of times people don't understand the power of a pause. I'm still teaching even if I take a break and I just sit there quietly and let a student collect their thoughts. And especially in math, that can be helpful. Yesterday we worked on addition problems, and in my pre-K bridge class, we're at a point where I'm asking them to build the quantities by themselves. So instead of showing them, and drawing 3 flowers, I say the numbers and I ask them to draw the quantities. And instead of rushing, I practice that pause and I, take a step back and I let them take their time. And when they're ready, they have a sign to show me, like touch your nose, touch your head. And we go from there. And if they get it wrong, I point them in the right direction. Instead of saying no, I say, oh, well, you have, 2 flowers. Does that make 3? Let's count it together. Or phone a friend, ask them for help. And I think that, it's such a simple thing, back to basics, just to take that pause. But so many of us feel uncomfortable in a virtual setting taking that pause because we are trying to entertain and engage, 4 or 5 students at the same time.
That's a great point too, is, giving students that wait time. That's a traditional classroom practice too, but something that I think that most of our DailiesPods teachers have been able to execute in the virtual setting really well. And it really does provide those richer, educational and academic experiences because students have the time. We have that luxury of having our small group classes that really can be personalized versus a classroom setting where you're feeling like you're constantly kind of rushing through because you have 25 kids to get through a lesson, So being able to bring that over to the virtual space is definitely, I think, something that enhances our classes, that they can take the time that they need, they'll get the support as they need it, without feeling like they're rushed or any sort of like negative emotion around learning. As far as implementing Montessori practices, let's say that, I have 3 kiddos at home right now. What would be like the first thing that I could do to kind of change or shift my mindset if I'm not already in that mindset, and how to support their learning maybe at home?
So for me, what I like to talk about with parents is, instead of thinking about tackling the whole, like, I'm going to make, my home Montessori friendly, I start to tackle the individual child. Well, that doesn't sense. that precision of language, for anybody who has read The Giver, I'm a big precision of language person. I take a look at what the child is doing. So for example, I said I have a 6-month-old and I am giving him a designated space in my home where he can touch and feel everything. So instead of saying no, I'm giving, you're talking about your new shelf? Yeah. So instead of saying no, I'm giving him a place that he can go to and everything is accessible to him. So putting everything on his height is a big Montessori thing, making things child sized. I have a shelf, and it's not just toys, it's academic. So he has all of his books that are available to him. He has a selection of toys. Some of them are not electronic so that he gets the brain stimulation. And then some of them do have the electronics, which is a very big diversion from Montessori itself, which is for very few electronics. So I start with that environment where everything is at his level. As kids get older, they can do more things. So as kids get older, they accumulate more toys, they accumulate, more needs. They can take their shoes off, they can get dressed by themselves. And so just having that child-friendly area for them to access their things. Instead of keeping their clothes on a really high section in the closet, maybe give them an area where they have 2 or 3 outfits to pick every day on their level. They can take it off the hanger, they can pick out their shoes, get their socks out. Instead of putting every single one of their toys on a shelf where they can access it, take a selection and change them out. And so that it's more of a choice instead of an overwhelming, oh, I have like 100 toys. We all go shopping and we say, I want to buy this and I want to buy this. And so just giving that a smaller selection so that kids are entertaining themselves with something that they choose and are interested in, instead of just the first thing that they touch. And then on top of that, think about when you're leaving for the day. I'm sure that I don't have this experience yet because Zachary, I get him dressed, I change his diapers, I feed him. But your kids, Jessica, are older, so they're getting themselves ready before they leave the house. So, and a lot of people do this already, but giving your kids extra time, be like, oh, we have to leave at, in 30 minutes. So we have a little visitor. We have to leave in 30 minutes. So then give your kids that time to get themselves ready, and I don't want to, for me, that's hard because I want to just be ready to go when I'm ready. But saying, oh, we have to leave in 30 minutes, get your shoes on, get dressed, instead of saying, oh, we have to be out the door in 30 seconds. And then your kids will adjust to that time frame and it'll get quicker and quicker to get themselves ready. Hi.
He's got some ideas too when it comes to the Montessori setup at home.
It's really just that autonomy at home, the Montessori at home. There was a quote from Maria Montessori I actually have written down because I really like it. And she says, to assist a child, we must provide him with an environment to develop freely. So a lot of us at home have off limits places where it's not safe for children to be touching, or it's something special and unique that we don't want broken. And we really have to think about just giving kids a part of the home where it's just theirs. There's not a no. Bolt the shelf to the wall so it's not going to come down if they pull on it. Put foam on the shelf so that hitting their head doesn't make a difference. But I think for me, that's the biggest aspect of Montessori at home. And also helping, going into the kitchen. Oh, sorry. Also helping like going into the kitchen, giving them a whisk. Say, can you stir this for me? Or can you count how many pieces of pasta we're going to put in the meal tonight? Different things like that.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm super glad that you were like, oh yeah, it's more about like the way that you kind of set up your space too, because I think at least when I have read things about Montessori education, it's like, oh, you've got to go spend these $300 on these climbing structures and all wood blocks and all of these things, which look absolutely phenomenal in the space. However, I have 3 boys, and so they're rough and rowdy, and oh my goodness, the house. But I love that you.
Oh, I was gonna say the tough thing is you grow out of things so quickly too. So you can get the climbing structures, but if your child grows out of it really quickly, where are you going to store it? Yes, it can be used for a long time, but you also have, I'm a big proponent for use what you have and make it accessible for learning.
Yeah. And if you're starting out as a parent, if you're putting things on your registry, you can be mindful, I guess, of the Montessori practices to ask for some of those things that may have be multifunctional. But I love that you brought up the fact of rotating toys. Excuse me, I guess I can't talk either. We got Thunder, we got Baby. I don't know. So super sweet. But yeah, rotating toys would be a really great option, I think, especially for parents that have multiple kiddos, because you think about holidays if you celebrate, and my kids, I feel like, always get a new toy for every holiday times 3. So it's just it's overwhelming for me. I can't imagine how overwhelming it would be for them to actually select a toy to play with. And then also creating that independence around that routine too, or the expectations around, being responsible for yourself and getting yourself ready, and cleaning up after yourself is a good one to kind of probably try working in as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that it doesn't have to be this overwhelming thing as a parent. It's just more about breaking it down simply, right? What do they need to accomplish for themselves each day? And how do we kind of help facilitate that? So I love that perspective. Makes it super, super easy, I think, for someone who maybe is trying to get into the Montessori approach too. So from our conversation today, I'm realizing that you may not have to be an expert on Montessori education in order to kind of implement some of these practices at home. But do you have any access to resources, or how would you recommend parents go to learn a little bit more about the approach or how to get started?
So there are, obviously, we all are in a generation where Google is a thing.
Yeah.
And I love to just Google different ideas. And the warning I give to parents, it's the same you get at the doctor's office. Don't be Dr. Google. Everything, your child is unique to, there's no other child that's like your child. So Google is a great resource to be like, hey, I'm going to Google what is a Montessori approach, or is this appropriate for my child's development? Can I get a shelf? And, for my son right now, he's crawling. So it's appropriate for him to have something to move around in. But it would not be appropriate for me to get him rollerblades right now to roll around the house. So just kind of looking at what you think is appropriate for your child. There are a lot of books out there that will say they educate you on Montessori, and I haven't read all of them, but take everything with a grain of salt because you are the expert on your child. So, if they say you must get all wooden materials, I mean, my son has electronics because that's the day and the age we live in. For him, that makes sense. And I limit his exposure to certain things because that's how I personally feel. There's a great set of books that I've read called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, and Listen So Kids Will Talk. And then there's some for younger kids as well. I can't, the exact title, it's like How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen. And it really teaches you how to get down on a child's level and how to communicate and create those boundaries that you want to create without feeling like you're constantly saying no. For me, when I say no, I feel like there's this blockage, and I'm not really giving my son, and he is young, but giving him an opportunity to say, oh, well, this isn't appropriate, I'm going to go choose something else. So it helps you build that foundation. But yeah, I mean, I'm always available. If you come to my pod classes, you can ask questions, and we can open a line of communication, just like any of the other DailiesPods teachers. And yeah, I would say Google, you can look at books. The How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk really opened me up as a teacher and a parent, and showed me how to communicate more efficiently with children, because their brains do work differently. They might do something after you say no, and you're like, well, why did you do that? Why did you touch the stove? It's hot. I just told you. But kids' brains are working differently, and that no doesn't make sense to them. So I think that's the most useful advice that I can give for parents looking for more information, because it is daunting to look for, to see that you need to buy 100 different things to make your house Montessori friendly, when really it's just about encouraging your children to do the same things that you're doing, to be an individual person in your household.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, it doesn't have to be this overwhelming thing. And that resource sounds great. I think I'm going to go pick it up on Amazon because that sounds like a great thing to have, especially with my kiddos too. So I guess, is there anything else that you would want to share with parents, families, teachers, anything related to the Montessori approach today?
I think that the biggest takeaway that I want people to have, and you said it already, Jessica, you don't have to be an expert to incorporate Montessori. And from what I shared today is just the tip of the iceberg. You can go, I mean, I've taught in a very strict Montessori classroom where we were very quiet. We learned quietly. We took all of the works and materials in the Montessori process. And it's a very unique pedagogy to look at. And for some kids, it's the right approach to be that strict. And some kids just really need that individuality. So I don't want you to be scared. And it's not something where I like, don't shame yourself or allow other people to shame you for your personal views on how to raise your kids, because this is just one approach out of so many different approaches that can work for you and your family. So while I'm choosing to raise my child this way because this is how I'm trained and how I teach, in a year or two, it might not be right for him. And then I'll have to make that choice to find something else. So I encourage parents and teachers to just try new things. And if it doesn't work for you, at least you tried it and you can circle back at another time. I like to be educated on a lot of different approaches and a lot of different things, and to choose what works best for my current situation, my family, my students, my job, what's required of me there.
Yeah, I love that. I love that sort of, open mindset, and don't be judgmental of yourself if something isn't working. Like, you could have these high hopes for, this implementation of this method at home. And then, maybe it's not the best fit for your child, and maybe that's actually hindering their progress or development. And so I think that the idea of parents being kind of really taking the time to be in tune with their kids. I know for me, I have multiples at home, so it's easy to kind of tell the difference. But my oldest, things that work for him, he's very independent, very responsible, great helper. My middle son, we call him our wild card, because he's just kind of like, sometimes he's like totally on it, totally responsible. Other times he's like getting into snacks at like 1 a.m. and we're noticing it on the camera in the house. Like, he's just such a wild card. So I think it really is about, having that flexibility and understanding as a parent first, because you're the expert on your kid, that this approach may work for your kid. It may not. It may work for one and not the other. So kind of just taking time to be in tune with them, watching them. I love that you brought up the observation piece of the Montessori of like, approach of just being able to like watch your kids and see how they're interacting as well. But yeah, it sounds it sounds overwhelming. You don't have to be the expert. We have great resources here at DailiesPods to help parents as they get started, or maybe are interested in getting started. So I appreciate your time today, kind of going in and touching on this concept and topic. But parents, if you are interested in joining a DailiesPods class, Miss Emily teaches with us Monday through Friday, and she would love to have your child and you join her for a DailiesPods class. And then if you did have any questions or responses, or kind of wanted to just connect with someone, Miss Emily can definitely help with that, in addition to our other teachers on our team as well. So we hope that you can join us, and we look forward to learning with you soon. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.